Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm going to go ahead today and review this book that I promised you, Rolex History Icons and Record-Breaking Models, by Osvaldo Patrizzi and Mara Cappelletti. Um, you'll remember it from our conversation on Michael Caine's Day-Date Oyster Quartz that recently sold for a whopping $165,000, including the premium. So we're gonna delve into the book, talk a little bit about what makes it such a great book and such a handy uh, reference work, while also being somehow interesting to um, people who are perhaps not as enthusiastic as we are about these watches. Turkey Vulture, welcome to the channel. Nice to see you here. Um, Welcome back. I want to start, as we're waiting for the list to populate, I just want to show you what I'm wearing today. I'm wearing my 16014 Datejust on this textured calf skin band. I think it's really a beautiful match for this presentation, and the band is a great match for this watch. Um, First of all, it reminds me of some of those auction presentations, where the bracelet may have gone missing, or perhaps it belonged to some quirky collector who didn't want anything to do with the steel bracelet and wanted a watch on a leather strap right out of the gate. Um, and usually the way they do it is to match it with a leather strap that goes with it, and pair it oftentimes with the matching Rolex buckle. Of course, in this case, we have it in steel. Right, and I think it's a very beautiful strap for this particular watch, this particular reference, because on the one hand, the gray color really matches the larger aesthetic of the watch, which is stainless steel with the silver linen dial, um, and the white gold bezel, of course. So the leather strap plays up the dressy aesthetic of the watch, but the contrast stitching, I think, is a really nice detail, um, that somehow also pays respect to the oyster case, which has its origins, of course, in producing a dustproof and waterproof case that would be appropriate for more sporting, athletic, and dynamic activities. Time is money. Welcome back. Welcome back to the channel. Um, it's really nice to see the familiar faces. I really appreciate all of you. So let's dive right in. Um, Remember when I was talking about the auction market and how it affects the secondary market in watches, and in Rolex watches in particular, I told you that uh, Antiquorum in Geneva was the place that really put the idea in people's heads that watches, clocks, and wristwatches in particular were deserving of the same kind of attention and presentation as any precious vintage and collectible object. And it was Osvaldo Patrizzi that who set up that um, department in Antiquorum Geneve's larger body, and that was before Christie's and Sotheby's, before these distinguished auction houses picked up on the idea to auction watches and wristwatches as part of their collection. Hello, Patricia. Welcome. Welcome back. And since that time in 1972, if I'm not mistaken, of course, the auctions and especially the way certain iconic models and certain Rolex watches belonging to celebrities, having been sprinkled with that stardust, have been breaking such records. You can say that the auction market has become, in a way, definitive of the secondary market in general, at least in terms of breaking certain ceilings, at least in terms of setting certain trends or solidifying certain trends in the cases, and just helping this up and up trajectory, this upward trend in the pricing of Rolex watches that really etched them in the public consciousness, right? This is no longer simply a hobby for the anoraks. Of course, Rolex as a brand name had already reached a certain kind of mainstream recognition by the 70s. But if you think about it, with Seiko introducing in December 1969 that quartz movement and popularized it in early 70s, when you think about that particular moment in the 1970s, the auction market had a lot to do with saving these watches and saving mechanical wristwatches as more than an antiquity into the next generation. It might sound a little paradoxical, but these days, of course, you can recognize how the auction houses are interested in the lion's share of the market, right? They, in many ways, with these online auctions and with these private sales that go on year round, they're really behaving in many cases like gray market dealers, not that much different. But that's another conversation altogether. Let me go into this book a little bit and try to present to you the things that I really like about this book. First of all, in true Italian fashion, the first thing they address about these watches is not their history, is not their technical detail, but what they call details of style, right? So everything is very helpfully broken down there, from hands of the watch, the logo, the winding crown, the straps and bracelets, the unique cases, right? You have an exemplary Daytona case there. You have the oyster quartz case here. Of course, the Submariner bracelet with the diver's extension and everything that goes with it. And you see how there is, in fact, a leather strap presented there with a Rolex déployant clasp, which is an interesting style to wear these watches with. But you do have to go with something that is very precisely produced, either someone who would make it on a special order for you, or one of those companies that seem to have boiled it down to a formula. So you see, in many different aspects, they break the watch down into the constituent parts and present them along with some really exceptional watches. So this is both a nerd's dream, but also quite an aesthetic experience. It's very pleasing to just sit down and flip through this book, even if you are familiar with its contents, having read the book before or having been exposed to this information elsewhere. It's really fantastic. Another thing that I really like about this book, and it doesn't surprise me coming from Osvaldo Patrizzi, is its presentation of Rolex history as really as a mythology, right? You know, look at that title; it's history and legend, right? And of course, Signor Patrizzi is very much aware that Rolex's history is part historical fact and part legend. So a lot of this information, a lot of these stories are presented in the book with the recognition that some of it is just part of the kind of myth that has embellished Rolex's past, both in terms of the stories that us enthusiasts have propagated and those stories that the marketing wing has either produced from whole cloth or somehow picked up and revitalized in another way. And again, you know, that whole idea of delving into some detail in narrative and presenting you with some of the best and rarest examples on the other is something that defines this book. And it's also a very handy book, right? It's not as unwieldy as some reference works. And at the end of the day, this is not really a reference work, right? We have to come to terms with this. It's not the kind of book. Again, I have it at hand here, where you have all these different examples of historical provenance of every single model listed and detailed. This is not that kind of book. It doesn't aspire to be that kind of book. It is something that you can peruse just for your own pleasure. It is something that you can, once again, gift to someone who loves these watches as much as you do, but who wants to learn a little bit more about them, who wants to learn perhaps a little bit more about how the auction market has dealt with these watches, and who wants to also perhaps peer into the history that made these watches feel so larger than life, right? That mythical aspect that we were talking about. St. Peter, welcome to the channel. I don't think I've seen you before, but it's really nice to have you here, St. Peter. Yeah, because again, we're familiar with the name, we're familiar with the brand, even if we are not interested in watches. But it's nice to see sometimes people who allow us to peek behind the curtain and try to understand what made a certain brand, what made another manufacturer, the kind of representation and the kind of embodiment of luxury and mystique that it has become over the years. And this is exactly that kind of book. Again, you see very equal representation of things that are unique of historical significance, and the kind of curiosities that would be represented by some historical advertisements for all the iconic models that you can think of. The Daytona, of course, is the one here, but there are ads, of course, for the Submariner, for the Yachtmaster. And again, it plays off, I think, beautifully from with the narrative that's printed again in larger letters than your usual book. So that's very helpful. As we age, we need these sorts of minor visual aids. Another thing that I really like about this book, you see all these icons that are presented page after page, right? After a very general presentation of the brand and its history, you jump into this specific story about the iconic models. And that to me is quite definitive of this book's structure, right? You expect this from any book, but sometimes it's hard to find it in books on watches, that there is some sort of thoughtful structure. There is a format. There was a concern for the narrative form of this book before they sat down and started writing it, right? I'm sorry to say this, but a lot of times that can be hard to find on books that are dedicated to our hobby, to our passion. In this case, you have a book that zooms in and out, right? I've already talked about how it has this beautiful interplay between specific stories and very eye-catching and exciting visuals of unique examples that are presented from Rolex's history. But when you look at the book's larger narrative arc, you have this idea that you zoom in and zoom out, right? Remember how it started by zooming in, breaking down these watches to their recognizable parts, from the bracelets to the bezels. The larger structure of the book is just like that as well. It zoomed out from that to the history and mythology of the brand. Now it's zooming in again to the icons and focuses on each specific model that has some sort of historical significance for the brand. And then, for example, after the presentation of all those icons, and these are mostly earlier models, right? Like the Prince that is presented right here. It will then zoom back out, right, to this very handy presentation of an entire timeline, right, that reduces the brand history to a number of bullet points. Because why not, right? We can have our cake and eat it too. And just under, I think, 150 pages, no, just exactly 151 pages of material. You have basically everything you could ask for from a coffee table book. Again, not being a reference book, this book, the Patrizzi and Cappelletti book, has all the makings of a great mix, great blend of education and entertainment. Rick Foss, welcome back. My greetings to Norway. I hope I remember correctly. Welcome back to the channel. So yeah, this whole thing might sound, again, absurd to suggest. It's perhaps obnoxious for me to say that I appreciate when some thought goes into the writing of a book, but after so many disappointments in picking up certain books on watches that are produced in this glossy and seemingly luxurious manner and not getting any substance from them, I really do appreciate when I have a book like this in my hands that has a good mix of both, right? Again, we're not subscribing to an encyclopedia, right? We are not necessarily looking for a reference work when we pick up a book like this, but we do want some meat on the bones, right? We do want some new information presented to us. We do want to learn something when we read a book, and not just look at these visuals that can be of unique pieces, but that gets tiring after a while. And a lot of these unique examples you can now find in our age online, in very professionally taken and produced macro shots where you can examine every single detail. So why put so much money on all these books that are not necessarily friendly to your wallet, so to speak? So it's really a nice surprise when you come across a book that seems to have struck a balance, right? The presentation of the historic icons, and then the more common models that still define Rolex's contemporary line, and those pages too, I think, have a very good balance of the models as they're introduced, some unique examples, and some sense of how they have developed over the decades, right? The Submariner, of course, is always a handy instance of how one model can preserve its character even as introducing minute innovations in every single generation. And of course, the part of the book that would be of interest, I'm assuming, to most, because of its, I just wanted to share this, one of my favorites in the modern line. I love this watch. But of course, the expertise of the book's authors inevitably set this part of the book as a centerpiece, even though it comes right before the last section, even though it is the penultimate section. And it shares with you all these record-breaking examples that have set the trend in the last few decades, in the last half century, you might say. And what I do really appreciate about this part is that it doesn't just stick to the Antiquorum collection. In fact, except for the first chronograph presented, most of the other watches that the authors share here are sold by Christie's. A lot of chronographs, a lot of unpredictable examples, right? Because we all know that Daytona's unique examples of Daytonas with a certain um, historical provenance and a sprinkling of celebrity stardust always sell well. Here we have more unique examples, like a Rolex moon phase, right? A few historical chronographs, pre-Daytona chronographs that were presented and that have all sold well, but also some predictable um, instances as well, where of course you will see a Daytona. Of course you will see um, a Daytona with the Paul Newman dial, uh, the lemon one in gold. Nevertheless, you have a number of examples that were not so predictable, and I do appreciate that, right? And it's not just, once again, it's not just examples presented from sales that Mr. Patrizzi made under the premises of Antiquorum in Geneva. But in fact, all these unique pieces that somehow constituted those building blocks that have perhaps taken us today to the historic craze that we are facing in terms of how even the most seemingly uninteresting and neglected Rolex models are fetching incredible amounts of money. Jay Sykes, nice to see you. MDW, love to see you here. Pavel, it's so nice to see you. Welcome back to the channel. Jay Sykes, incredible point, very relevant point. First step when starting watch collecting is research, read books, and look at historical documents. There's nothing that can replace education and research when it comes to starting off a vintage watch collection, especially. You have to familiarize yourself with whatever information that is available to you. Of course, the internet contains a wealth of information, but that means you also need to navigate. So my suggestion is always to seek out people in your area who possess this sort of knowledge, possess this sort of quote unquote expertise, right? They might not be in the business themselves, but if you see someone in your area who has a nice collection, who has a thoughtful collection, you can depend on that person for certain kinds of knowledge, right? It might be limited, but that's okay, right? You can still learn something and take it somewhere else and do something else with that information. And worst case scenario, you will have, again, enhanced your own knowledge, your own treasure trove, and perhaps we'll be able to pass that on. We'll be able to pay forward that sort of knowledge in the community, right? Even if you would not be interested, particularly in those models, right? Nothing replaces that sort of patient research and amassing of knowledge over the years. And of course, that involves reading. Of course, that involves pouring through pages and pages of websites and examining in detail these macro shots where you have the finest examples of a watch of a certain vintage, but nothing will quite compare to actually handling these watches. So that should be part of your journey, as it were. That should be part of your learning process, right? Nothing can teach you how to recognize a fake, how to recognize a Frankenwatch, how to recognize a watch that is a little too worn than actually handling examples of watches, vintage watches that are in honest condition and that represent the real heritage of that brand and the authentic provenance of that particular model. Rick Foss says that vintage gold Daytona is insane. So I will share it once more here. I think those are really beautiful watches. And again, I'm not even a chronograph guy, but when I see something like this, it tickles my brain in a certain way. BC, welcome back to the channel, BC. It's so nice to see you. Time is Money says, I love researching the history of these beautiful works of art from cars to watches. I completely agree. And that's, perhaps one of the things I would like to say about this book, right? I think, again, from all these books that I presented on the channel so far, this is the best combination that blends useful information with the entertainment and joy you can get from professionally photographed and produced visuals of some unique examples of watches. And what better, who can do that better from someone who basically made these objects collectible in a certain way. Again, beyond us anoraks, right? Beyond us enthusiasts. If it weren't for Patrizzi, you can imagine that watch collecting as a hobby would have been in a different place, right? I'm not saying that auction houses would not pay any heed to that. I'm not saying that that they wouldn't be as precious. I'm not a diviner. I can't see into the future. I can't see into counterfactuals. But you have this book that's done by Patrizzi, who has introduced the idea of selling wristwatches to auction houses for the bigger auction houses such as Sotheby's and Christie's to pick it up later. And what better person to present you these things, not only as achievements of technology, but also as works of art. Yeah, Loose Tooth, welcome to the channel. I think I have a request. You mean a number of good books and vintage watches? You're going to go down that road? I thought that was my shtick. So if you have any requests or recommendations, please feel free to send it to this email that is connected to my PayPal. I stand behind my promise. It's until the end of this month, until the end of March. Everything is absolutely free. If you want me to delve into the history of a certain brand, if you want me to review a particular model, to look into an aspect of a brand's history, if you want me to review a book, if you want me to guide you through your next purchase in vintage or contemporary watches, I'm always here. Just email me, and I will see what I can do. And I think I can help you with most things, if not everything. Now, when it comes to, of course, when it comes to collection reviews. I guess that's perhaps what you mean with vintage watches. Vintage watches you own, perhaps. I'm also happy to do that, ideally in a format that involves you, that where I can have you on the panel and where we can have a broader conversation about these watches, what drew you into them, and how they take part in your life, in your lifestyle, um, outside of that watch box, so to speak. I would really appreciate that. I would really love to do that for you as well. And for anyone and everyone else who has participated in this channel so far. With that, I also want to invite you to join me in conversation if you like. I have some free time for the next hour or so, so I'd love to talk a little more with some of you on the panel. Yes, but with my excitement about concluding that conversation about Patrizzi and Cappelletti's book, I forgot another aspect of how they use that zooming in and out format of their narrative to close the book, right? They have presented that important piece of Rolex history in which Patrizzi himself played a part, right? How there were these record-breaking wristwatches that were sold on auctions, and then as if to gesture into the future, as if to say, yet there's more to come from both Rolex and from future wristwatches that go on auction, that will go on auction. They also present on the technological innovation that drives these models and that would ideally drive Rolex forward as a brand as well. And it all ends in this general glossary that again would be really helpful to someone who doesn't perhaps have as much experience and as much knowledge as the average collector that we have here as part of this community, as part of the Archiverse. Jay, absolutely not. Would you take your vintage Datejust to RSC for service? I would not. It soon needs service, and I would like to also replace the crystal with a top hat, so to speak, even though it doesn't properly belong to the era, perhaps. But that's because of a number of things, right? Even if you are very picky, if you don't live in an area where you have a number of very qualified watchmakers who specialize in vintage watches, of course you can go to or deal with a Rolex service center. But you have to be very communicative and very specific about what you want and what you don't want. And I have heard of instances where they say, well, we would refuse service if you don't take this and this and this. Like if you don't want to change the hands, and if you don't want to change the dial, if you don't replace the crystal, we can't actually service your watch. And let's say they're saying, like, they would replace the hands on a tritium dial watch with superluminova and keep the original set of hands, and they want to replace your plexi plastic crystal with sapphire because there's a hairline crack somewhere um, just say no, right? Have your red lines when you're dealing with the official service center, the Rolex RSC, um, and I'm sure you can still get a good result. Um, but you have to be very communicative. You have to be very specific about what you want and what you don't want. And uh, if they tell you that we won't service your watch um, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, um, put your foot down. Uh, Again, I've heard of cases where they relent sometimes to a certain extent, but if they don't, take your business elsewhere. There's so many, especially if you're in a metropolitan area like Chicago, like New York, like Los Angeles, San Francisco. At any given area that I've just counted, and many others in the US, there are at least half a dozen very qualified people who who deal with watches like this on a daily basis. And that's one of the things about that's one of the great things about collecting vintage Rolex. Uh, God bless you, archive of sorts. Nice to see you. Um, yeah, that I mean, beyond ETA or Vaju movements, what other watch movement do you know that can be so easily and capably serviced worldwide? Right, that's the advantage of owning a Rolex. Yes, you have the service centers. Yes, if you don't want to worry too much about it, and you have a more or less contemporary watch, uh, send it to the service center, drop it at your uh, local authorized dealer, drop it off at your local authorized dealer, um, and don't worry about it until you get the call back. But perhaps it's the idea of a certain uh, old world relationship. I like having my vintage watch mender as much as I like having um, my barber. I'm certainly due for an haircut. As much as like having an alterations tailor, um, as much as I like having a cobbler in the neighborhood. Um, if you have a collection of vintage watches, I think it's only fitting that at least in person, one very capable vintage watchmander who can help you with this process in many ways, much more capably and carefully than the Rolex Service Center. Um, and for the most part, also much cheaper than the Rolex Service Center. Um, Have is a great point. He says, "There's only one person in my land I let touch my hair." Um, I also like Archive because the person in his avatar has a unibrow just like I do. So um, Archive is one of my favorite people in the YouTube boxing community, but he also has a fledgling interest and a lot of enthusiasm about watches. So I love seeing him here. St. Peter says, agreed. I love having loyal relationships with local professional small businesses. That's another point. That's another point. Um, Again, look, I'm not trying to say that I'm the biggest advocate of small business and mom and pop stores. At the end of the day, when you look at my watch collection, it's all Rolex and a very predictable uh, watchmaker brand, Gégé Lecoultre. It's not like I have a collection of very unique and unpredictable vintage watches. that were produced one of a kind. It's not like I go to the independents these days to have them make me, a one of one kind of watch. But when it comes to these sorts of daily affairs, really, and the service of your vintage watch should be part of your everyday. Hopefully, not every day, but every 5, 7 years or so for each watch. Um, and that's entirely possible and normal when you have a decent watchmaker. But it's one of those instances where you want to support your local business, but also have this intimate relationship of mutual trust uh, between two people, right? It's the kind of relationship where you usually go to them with a small gift, where you talk about any random thing, of course, including watches, whenever you visit, and they provide you great, reliable service. You know exactly the person who is working on your watch. And if there is a small problem or an issue that needs addressing, you pick up your watch and walk over or drive over, uh, and deal with it directly, face to face. You can't replicate that uh, with a multinational conglomerate or with a corporate giant. It just doesn't happen that way. Um, all right. Again, I would love to have some of you over on the panel, but if we would rather take a break until Tim's stream starts, I'm fine with that as well. That's going to be at 2, if I'm not mistaken. Stream start. Let me amateur hour again. I forgot to mute my own stream on the other tab. I'll just post the link here of Tim Wright's stream that's going to start at 2. So if no one would like to come and open up the conversation here with me to talk about anything, really, it doesn't have to be about this book at all, and it doesn't even have to be watch related. As I said, I have an hour of free time just lounging around and drinking coffee, and um, I would rather talk to someone or read than sit idly. So I'll give it another 2 minutes and then perhaps jump off. But yeah, for those of you who joined later, I want to show off that date just that Jay was talking about. This is 16014. Of course, I have the original bracelet, but I like wearing it on a leather strap, as I do most of my watches. And I have gotten at least a dozen of these matching buckles, so I don't have to go on a treasure hunt to locate one exactly when I need. So yeah, this is the date. Just I'd rather have it on what they call a top hat acrylic crystal, right? With that comes a little higher up than this. Yeah, I just like the aesthetic of a vintage date just. um, it's as recognizable and as iconic as many other models. But on those days where you want to fly under the radar, when you want to get something, when you want to wear something that's not so uh, obnoxious and in your face, and a vintage Submariner on its oyster bracelet can be exactly that at times. It's nice to wear a Datejust on a leather band, right? It's still very very distinguished, very lovely. It comes in that recognizable Rolex oyster case, um, but it's smaller, it's more subtle, um, and it's again a thing of simplistic beauty. The reason I like my Submariner is because it doesn't have a date complication, so no cyclops, not much writing on the dial either, just two lines at 6 o'clock, and you don't need anything else, right? And here it's the same thing, right? You have an entire gray color scheme, um, steel case, white gold bezel, and the silver linen dial. You can't ask for much more. I think it's a great dress watch, but also quite sporty on a leather strap like this that has contrast stitching. My coffee of choice. My coffee of choice actually at home is very simple. It's Cafe Bustelo that I buy in these bricks. Those are also very iconic. Actually, I wanna bring one of them over now. This is it. Um, they're incredibly cheap, especially when you buy them in bulk. Um, it's it's great. It's great for your no nonsense uh, morning cup. Not too harsh, not too bitter, but has enough of a kick to give you that jolt in the morning. And yeah, to match with the serial killer image, of course, I take it all black. Um, no supplements, no additions, certainly no milk or sugar. Um, and I love it. I love it. It's just beautiful, especially if you do it by the traditional method, which both Cubans and Italians use. It's what they call mocha or mocha pot, right? This two-piece, or rather three-piece, stovetop espresso machine, right? It has the water container, then this cone that you put into there with coffee that you don't need to pack. You just put a mound of coffee in there, and then you screw down the upper part and just blast your stove until it tells you that it's ready by bubbling up into that upper part. It's very practical, it's very easy, it's very affordable. You can get those mocha pots from Amazon, um, either made in China or Italy, according to your choice. Both very affordable, um, and just great taste, great flavor, and a great start to your day. I could harp on and on about Cafe Bustelo. It's very dear to me for whatever reason. I'm not gonna go into it now. Um, but again, it's one of those simple things. It's one of those little things I really appreciate as part of daily life. MLMJ, welcome back to the channel. So nice to see you. Sorry I didn't say hi earlier. I'm just seeing now your message. Um, Time is money. My favorite date just is the Azzurro blue dial on the Jubilee bracelet. Perfect, perfect. And that's the other thing I want to say. You know, we keep saying that um, this is the best deal now. This is the watch to get in the Rolex sports line. And I like having those conversations. I've participated in those conversations. I will repeat here once more. Get a 5-digit black dial Explorer 2 while you can. Get one in that perfect, imperfect, or imperfect, perfect condition, ideally with papers. If it also has the box and full set, that's great. I think that's a great, great piece of advice. But the Rolexes to get, of course, are these simple 4 or 5 digit Datejusts in good condition. A lot of examples still right under 5K, especially those that don't have any special dials. You can get them at very reasonable prices. Of course, a blue dial is always commands a premium. Other unique dial colors, of course, uh, the seller would demand a premium for that. But any old tapestry or linen dial, um, if you like that sort of simple execution in a dress watch that comes in a smaller size, don't hesitate. This is the time. And of course, we don't expect in the according to current trends in the market for smaller watches, 36 millimeter watches, to explode anytime soon. Um, but again, following those trends, don't expect them to suddenly have in price tomorrow either. So it's as good of a moment as any to get a Datejust if that's something you would like to have, if that's a piece of the puzzle that you're completing as part of your watch collection. That was the case with me. I got one right around the time when the lockdown started, and it was a great deal. And suddenly now they have already jumped up to a 5K and more, as a full set with the bracelet and everything. Um, so Racing R Lord just purchased the Omega Seamaster 300 Heritage 41 2021. I've been enjoying it a lot. Your thought on this piece? It's it's a great piece. I've never actually owned a Seamaster diver myself, but it is one of those models that I just love, and it has a lot to do, of course, with me uh, being a Bond fan, and the Bond that I grew up with, uh, Pierce Brosnan, of course, was wearing an Omega watch, was wearing a Seamaster 300, and that tradition, of course, carried all the way into Daniel Craig as well. Um, that's just a beautiful watch. I think the way they brought back, uh, I'm not, am I being mistaken in thinking that that has the wave dial, right? That's what they brought back as the wave dial, the Seamaster 300 Heritage. Oh no, sorry, I'm a fool. But even better, even better. What color of the dial did you choose on this? I like these even better, actually. I have to say, because there are a few things about the Seamaster Diver that went with Bond that I just can't quite wrap my head around. Right, the helium escape valve is one part of that. The skeletonized hands, another part. This is the one that I really like, actually. Um, it's really beautiful. Wow. Congratulations on this purchase. Wear it in good health. I love it. I love it on the bracelet. I love it on that vintage looking leather strap. And let's bring it up. Actually, it's I think the hands and just the vintage aesthetic really makes this watch for me. And of course, I can't complain about the absence of the helium escape valve, which has become again part of that design. But for whatever reason, I was never captivated with it, even though again, Seamaster 300 has always been a watch that I appreciate. Of course, this particular model pays more of an homage to those original divers that were military issue, more than paying any sort of Bond homage. But the lollipop seconds hand, the arrow hands for hours and minutes, beautiful watch, beautiful watch. If I didn't have a Rolex Submariner, and if I were buying something new, something contemporary, this would be a watch that I would go for. Congratulations, it's great. Big Meech, welcome back. Wristwatchaholic, welcome to the channel. I think you are one of the LA guys. I look forward to meeting you in watch time in May. Right, it's going to be right here in downtown LA. So I'm really excited. What year is that, DJ? I think I want to say 1974. I'll tell you next time when I pop out the bracelet, or when I get back to my documents rather, because I actually took a note of this, but I'll make a mental note now. And next time, Rick, you don't even have to remind me. I'll let you know. But it is from mid to late 70s, either 74 or 77. One reason that I really like my collection, even though it wasn't very thoughtful in this way, is that I have a watch from each decade, right? I have something from the 60s in my Submariner, something from the 70s in my Datejust, something from the 80s with my Root Beer GMT, something from the 90s with my new GMT Master 2 Coke, and something exactly from year 2000 with my Polar Explorer 2, which has the solid end links and no holes case, with the Luminova lume on the dial. I think it's a great compromise between vintage and neo-vintage on one hand, and the modern and contemporary on the other. Raphael Butterbread, so nice to see you. Rick Foss agrees the 300 Heritage is a winner. The hands just make it stand out. I completely agree. I never got over the skeleton hands on the regular production Seamaster 300 diver. I think this Heritage model just takes the cake, really. Getting rid of the helium escape valve and going with a different, more vintage aesthetic on the hands was also, I think, a great choice. No wave dial, it's the one with lollipop hands. Yes, thank you for the correction, Racing. Right. And when it comes to those wave dials, I do see that would be one other watch that I would consider, because I think the execution of the wave dial on those early 90s examples, like from around 93, were much better. The dials are more of this bluish gray in color for the most part, and the waves are executed on them by the rose mills, so kind of like a hand guided guilloche, right? And it gives a lot more of a subtle but elegant texture to that dial that looks all different ways from different angles. Um, I think I would rather consider something like that than one of the contemporary wave dial Seamaster divers that I think are laser engraved on the dial. And it's still a beautiful design. It still stands out. It's really nice, but um, I think that 90s aesthetic has something special about it. And at the end of the day, I'm a vintage guy, right? If you have a ceramic bezel insert, chances are that you have already lost me. But who cares, right? There are a lot of people who love those watches and who are dying to get one. So I appreciate that they exist, because for me, it's one of those things that takes something from the brand's heritage and does something new in the present with it to carry that legacy forward. So I appreciate that, those levels of innovation that go into contemporary Omega and Rolex watches. NDW, Lord, what are your thoughts on Bremont watches? I'll have to use some gentlemanly restraint on that subject. I don't have any good things to say. Let me just say in one sentence, I think they're very overpriced for what they are. Lord, you ever go to the watch dealer, the Keystone? Yes. Grunberg actually had storefront, walk-in store in Beverly Hills. I think they will reopen it in due time. In the lockdown, they have basically carried all their business to online and special appointment only. They have also introduced this new concept of their own auction website called Loop This, that has great watches, but usually there's a bidding craze on each and every example, so they end up going for quite a premium. But yes, when they had their storefront and before this entire luxury watch craze started, they were one of those dealers in hi, Joe.
What's going on, Lord?
Hey, man, nice to see you. I was just talking about Justin Grunberg in Beverly Hills, who is a great vintage watch dealer. Before the craze, he was still operating his storefront, and it was one of those stores that mostly earned through volume. So they actually had quite reasonable pricing for a vintage watch dealer in Beverly Hills. I don't know how they will come back, having built a different kind of clientele online. But the Keystone is just a great vintage watch dealer. The guy has grown up with dealing in vintage watches. His father is the original. I think his father's name is Donald, if I'm not Donald Grunberg, if I'm not mistaken. So if you can pay the premium that their watches sometimes come with these days, it's a great business to deal with.
Yeah, they sound fantastic.
Wristwatchaholic says, Lord, Omega Boutique in Beverly Center will have the event to show their new novelties in April. I'm absolutely interested. I still look, I mean, they're always, when you think about certain models, there are always one or two things that on paper might not look good, but that somehow feel as part of the design as a whole. And when it comes to those skeletonized hands and the helium escape valve on the Seamaster, that's my sense. Usually, whenever I see it in a photograph, I kind of pull back. But when I see those watches in person, I'm usually mesmerized. So I want to see the Riddler. I want to see the new Green Seamaster in person. I would love to come to that event. So please keep me updated, Wristwatchaholic. Send me an email if you want at Lord Hellespont the 5th at gmail.com, Lord Hellespont V at gmail.com, and I would love to join. How are you doing, Joe? You're driving?
Yeah. I hope it's not too annoying, but
Not at all.
it's finally nice weather here. It's finally hitting 50 degrees after the last 5 months of just being bitter cold. So figured today would be a great day for a nice lazy Sunday drive and perhaps get a little dinner as well.
Yeah, get out there. Get out there. How have you been thinking about watches recently?
I'm always thinking about watches. There are three things I always think about: women, watches, and alcohol. So we're getting into that interesting time where all three are going to collide together. Look,
That's what I was going to say. They usually go together, don't they?
absolutely. It's like a nice hot dog and an ice cold beer on opening day at Fenway Park. I mean, you can't beat it. But have you seen some of the mock-ups that the Tudor groups are starting to release now? One of the more interesting ones, I think, is a Black Bay 58 with white gold on the indices instead of yellow gold, which basically makes it look like a Submariner. Honestly, I don't know how I feel about that. What are your thoughts?
Where did you see these mock-ups? I haven't come across them yet.
So I don't know if you follow the Tudor group on Facebook or not, but I know there's quite a few mock-ups popping up there. I think maybe ID Guy may have done some release mock-ups. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I mean I love Tudor. Let me get that straight. And the thing is, to me, they always look better on paper than how they feel in my hands. Because obviously, as someone who loves the vintage Rolex aesthetic, that's what those watches exude. I think they do a great job in carrying forward that vintage aesthetic in more modern, heftier, and more substantial wristwatches today. But they never felt quite right to me because a lot of those elements are false, right? Like the rivets on their bracelets.
Right.
It's the lume is not aged. It's made to look aged. And I can live with all of that because, again, I appreciate the aesthetics. But then again, especially since they started using their in-house movements, the watches have become quite thick. So they're too big from what I expect from, with regards to what I expect from that aesthetic. Because I look at it, it looks like a vintage watch. I put it on, it feels like a modern watch. And to me, those two things don't go together.
Yeah, that's always especially with guys like you who definitely have got a firm finger on the pulse of vintage. That definitely doesn't sit well with you guys because it's a fraud in a matter of speaking. In a tongue-in-cheek way, it's a bit of a fraud watch because it lacks the authenticity of what a vintage watch is. But guys like me who really do appreciate vintage but don't want to deal with the hassle of vintage, we end up winning out on the battle between vintage and non-vintage. Although I do agree, even with the 58, it's still a little bit too thick. I feel like they could slim maybe a couple centimeters off of it still. Uh but I don't. I think out of stubbornness, I don't think Tudor will, because they want to have that distinguishing look that Tudors are big chunky watches. That is kind of the signature look, in the same way that the helium escape valve is the signature look for the Seamaster. I think being big and chunky, large and in charge is what Tudor's about.
Yeah, I think I was cutting in and out for a second there, but Saad, welcome.
Hello to both of my brothers. Hello, Lord. Hello, Big Meech. Hope you're doing well.
Hey.
Greetings, General Saad.
I am just listening to your discussion. Please carry on. I'm just listening to it.
Oh no, we were talking about Tudors, and again, like, look, one of the best compliments that I got about my Submariner in the wild was, "Is that a Tudor?" Um, and I'm not trying to be funny. I really, again, I appreciate that Tudor has taught an entire new generation how to appreciate the aesthetics of a vintage Rolex watch, right? So for that, I'll always be grateful to that brand. I'll always be enthusiastic about anything and everything they release. I don't know if it is in the cards for me to own one in any near future. Uh, but I love, again, as much as I love Rolex's contemporary models for carrying forward that legacy in a way that blends it with minor improvements and minute modifications over the years that add up and accumulate. I also appreciate the way Tudor really delves into the history of Rolex as a brand and its own brand to produce something that's more to the liking of a younger crowd. I you know they, I think it's
Lord,
my
I think
favorite brand.
Tudor is a very important brand because Rolex, the founders of Rolex themselves introduced this to the market. It's not that board of governors in the modern, world, they introduced in the meeting room that okay, we need to have a much cheaper brand. So this was by the Rolex themselves, by the founder of the Rolex.
Yeah,
He said he wanted this brand to be introduced to the market. So I would say it should not be considered as a trash brand of any sort or anything. And I would say that you should consider it if you want it at any point.
yeah, absolutely, I do. I mean, again, I have these, like, I have been on a relatively regular schedule of getting a new watch or two every year or every other year, and each time it is part of, I take at least an entire year to think about my choices. So each time there is at least one Tudor model that I somehow take into consideration, and it falls off somewhere along that process of elimination. So one of these days, I'm sure I will either get one or get much closer to owning one.
But
Um,
Lord, the thing I like about you is that you still consider the classic 36 millimeter to be relevant. So that is why you have still opened, lot of choices with you. You can still have 36 millimeter date just, you can have day dates, you can have lot of watches. So that is why, oh, look at that, right?
yeah,
So you you
that's
you wear you wear
that's
these classic sizes. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, to me again, it's not. I'm not a militant for either 36 or 39 or 42. I think it has to come together as one package. It has to play its role in a beautiful single execution. So when I think of day chests and day dates, for me, for the most part, like 90% of the time, 36 is the right size, because I think of them as very elegant and at times possibly flashy dress watches.
I
Um,
agree, 100%. Even you have still sometimes discussed about the King Midas editions, basic. So you
mhm.
have a very unique taste, I would say, for a modern person like you. You, I consider you to be a contemporary classic type of a guy who loves classic stuff. Is a modern guy, but who loves classic stuff. That is why you love the John Lob's shoes. I mean, people of your age, they don't know what John Lobb is. They know
He's
what Skechers is, what Adidas is, what Nike is, but they don't know what John Lobb is.
Mr. Lobb is coming at the end of May to Los Angeles, and I think he will have a pair for me. So I'm very
Wow,
excited.
man. You should
I
make
will.
a
I'll try
video
to
on that.
show them off here on this channel as well. Not sure if
Amazing.
it will have many takers, but I know you would appreciate it at least. So I would love to share.
I mean,
Uh,
I love uh, to talk about these, uh, you know, something which we guys miss now. The modern people don't know about these stuff. They know about the very, very casual stuff, which which I don't personally, appreciate. You need to have certain style in you. The fashion of the early 1930s, 1940s. The way people used to dress, which was formal in style. So I personally like those kind of fashion than having very casual wear all the time. You
yeah,
know.
I think also, one of the things that I keep thinking about, and that I also keep um, employing in my life, is how you can bring in that one element of style, that one article of clothing in a situation that is otherwise casual, and it will still make a difference. I appreciate, the kind of outfit that Joe presents, for example, in his avatar, right? Which was truly inspired, um, and which is really put together by his Cartier Santos there. Um,
Yeah.
I do appreciate outfits like that, and I put myself together in a similar way when the occasion demands it. But otherwise, when you have a nice pair of leather shoes in classic style, you can you can even wear them with a nice pair of dark denim jeans. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter. They will still elevate your style. When you have a shirt that is cut for you and that fits you well, you can wear it under a nice sports coat, and it will still shine in its own way. But you can also wear it, with khakis, and just go out, to do your shopping at CVS, and you'll still look classy and sexy, as Mr. GMT puts it.
Lord, we will do a separate stream on these wardrobe stuff because it's a very vibrant and a big, you know, s- um, discussion. But I don't want to bore the panel here. Also, the people in the chat because they are mostly watch guys here.
Yeah, of
So
course.
we will,
You're a star. So you came on the panel. The viewership already increased,
oh no, man, I'm
and
just your humble friend.
you bring a certain firepower into any conversation that's always very attractive to everyone. So I appreciate that. You bring in whatever you want to talk about, and
It-
at the end of the day, this is when I open the conversation. That's what I have in mind. I don't want to stick to one topic or one subject.
Yeah, Big Meech was discussing with you about vintage watches. And I kind of agree with him because I myself, even though Lord, I know you are a person who collects vintage watches, but you are expert in it. You know where to find the watches, where to find the parts for them, and where to find the person who can service those watches, right? And
Mhm.
the most important thing about it is to authenticate those watches. Now, most people like us, like me and other guys, they cannot do those things. For us, the modern watches are something which is, less stressful. It can be easily authenticated. We have a lot of data available on the internet. For the older watches, the watches that were made in the 70s, about that. There are so many variations in the dials, even that were made in the 70s. The
Yeah.
fonts were different. You cannot have information today. After a few years, you will see the watch which is fake today. You will realize that that watch was actually not fake. That was not a replica. This has happened to me, Lord. A watch which I thought was a repainted dial few years ago. I came to know about that was an original dial. We didn't had information on that on the internet. So
Yeah.
this is the problem we face on the for the vintage watches, and also the serviceability and availability of parts, especially when it comes to the caliber, the movement. It's very difficult. So it's like maintaining an old model Rolls Royce. Newer model cars, anybody can maintain that. With the old model Rolls Royces, it's very beautiful. The lines and the curves on those old Rolls Royce Phantoms and Ghosts, and the clouds are very beautiful. But it's not everybody's heart that can maintain those.
Yeah.
So
Look, I
I've
mean,
seen your watches. It's in mint condition. I haven't seen that kind of mint condition watches with anybody else.
look, they it depends on which watch we are talking about. It depends also the way that the camera catches it. I would describe most of my watches, except for the Coke, and to a certain extent this Datejust. Most of them are really in well worn, honest condition. They have very good cases that, in some cases, preserve the exact factory finish. In other cases, preserve the larger contours of that original finish. Um, and that's what I usually look for. And to find the right example, in
Yeah,
some cases, I waited 2-3 years. I went out out of town sometimes to examine certain things, not across the ocean, not another country unless I was already there.
yeah,
Uh, but in certain cases, I went, out of Los Angeles down to San Diego, up to San Francisco, anywhere in between, Las Vegas. I explored, and that's what I want to say. One, I'm lucky, right? I'm fortunate that I'm in a large metropolitan center in the United States where you have a lot of resources, where you can
mm,
handle a lot of good and bad examples of these vintage watches, and where you have already a number of watchmakers who can, one, authenticate these watches for you, two,
yeah, yeah,
perform service on them for you with authentic parts, and sometimes vintage replacement parts if you need them, right? Yeah, for example, if you bring your tritium loom watch, tritium dial, tritium hands watch to Rolex, and
yeah,
they want to replace one or both, they will give you superluminova replacements, right? When you go to a vintage expert, watchmander, they can actually supply you with the matching tritium hands, for example, and
yeah,
you don't have to change the dial. Um, so I'm lucky when it comes to that, because I'm in Los Angeles, and before that I was in New York. I was just fortunate. But you also have to have initiative, right? I could have just sit on my back in New York or in Los Angeles and just browsed a few websites, all the usual suspects you have as secondary dealers online on Instagram. I could have just done that, but other people, go grab some beer with friends. Other people, I don't know, maybe date 4 or 5 women at once. For the most part, I had one steady relationship, and I had this as my main hobby, other
I
than
understand him. Yeah.
working out. So I dedicated a lot of time, and nothing will replace that. That's the thing. Education and hands-on experience. Those are the two things. If you have time in your hands, and if you don't mind putting the next 2 years, some people started coloring books in lockdown.
Yeah.
Some people started doing puzzles. I just focused more on the watch hobby. So,
Yeah.
it is what it is.
And I understand what you look on these watches. The first thing that you notice is how the lugs are in condition, the symmetry and the width of the lugs. If the case is over polished, nothing can be done about it.
Right.
Even though I have really heard that you can do laser welding and this and that, but then again, man, that's not original then, you
Of
know.
course not. Of course, I don't recommend it. But
Yeah.
look, let me put it like this, Sat. I have, from vintage watches that I bought, I never sold anything. So it's not like I'm trying to fool anyone. But one of my dream vintage watches is
Yeah.
a double red Sea Dweller, right? Suppose I find one in great condition, impeccable dial, great set of hands. Everything has aged perfectly well within that frame. Original bracelet, even have the papers, but the case is a little over polished. If I get a good price on that watch that helps me afford it, I can't afford it with my current budget, right? I can't afford the best example on the market, which I would love to own. If I find something like that and it's a great deal, I would get it, and I would take it to one or two great places in Los Angeles that do this laser welding with CNC, and
Yeah.
who have the expertise to then apply the factory finish on it. I would absolutely do that. If it saves me 30, $40,000 on a watch that I want to make personally part of my collection, I would do it.
I think I agree with you on this. You're 100% right here. Yeah.
But
Say,
as a
Lord,
general,
could you swing a double red right now? Could you swing one? Because I've got, I know where you can pick one up. Sitting in the display case right now. Nobody wants them.
how much are they selling it for?
Memory serves right, just shy of 95,000,
I can't.
195,000.
I can't. That's what I'm saying. That the ones in great condition, and if they have papers and box, etc., they fetch very high prices, and I just can't. I can't put down that much money in a single watch. But let's say I found something like that, but it was 50K because the case was just polished out of recognition. I would buy it, because you know what? When it comes to vintage examples, a perfect dial sometimes costs in and of itself tens of thousands of dollars. A perfect set of hands that matches the lume on that dial, thousands of dollars. A perfect bracelet, don't even think about it. So all of this adds up. If the case is the only imperfect element of an otherwise perfect set, I would take it. If it saves me $20,000, $30,000 in the process, God bless.
By the way, Lord, I accidentally lied. That's 95,000. I just double checked. I got two watches mixed up.
95?
Correct.
Yeah, yeah. Um, GB Vol is asking, welcome back, GB. 95, not 195. Um, Jay Gray's here. Welcome back to the channel. Yeah, that's one of my dream watches. You know, if my Submariner um, wasn't a family keepsake, there are moments where I think, like, should I try to sell my entire collection and just get like the perfect double red sea dweller and retire from the hobby? But I know it's not gonna work anyways, right? If I did something like that, and even if I had the perfect watch, years down the line where I have again some disposable money, I will end up buying more watches. So why do it that way? Um,
Lot of watches are basically not waste of money. So no matter how many watches you get, it it's not a waste. You are, you are actually earning money, I would say. So even if you have like 10,000 spare in with you, just get yourself a Rolex for that,
yeah,
and it's a great investment, I would say.
absolutely,
That
absolutely.
invest in steel. Invest in steel.
Steel stunners. Yes, I mean, look, this guy, my idol, and I know an idol to many. Um, Archie Luxury has been drilling this into our brains, and it's become a self-fulfilling prophecy at this time, right? Invest in Steel Sports Rolex. If
Even
you,
though they're very ugly looking watches, but still.
I know, I know,
Just let it
Mr.
go, Saad. Let it go.
President.
Okay,
Um,
I'm just
so
joking.
yeah,
Joking,
I
Lord,
know,
I'm just
no,
joking.
but look, we all have our tastes, we all have our preferences. I don't
I
get
have a
offended
steel
by it.
sports too, Lord. I was just, you know that. We are
I know,
friends.
but I know your father still berates you when you wear your Daytona because it's
You
not.
know, you know, honestly, Lord, even today, we were going for a formal wedding, somebody's wedding. So the first question he asked me was, what watch are you wearing? So I just showed him that I'm wearing a day date. So he was okay. Okay, good. Yeah.
But
I knew that he would ask me. So
But
I
what
took,
I was saying is, like, Archie drilled this into our brain and it has become a self-fulfilling prophecy. But yes, look, if you have a lot of money and if you find the right deal, and the right deal is currently not in the United States or in Europe when it comes to real estate, if you have connections in some other part of the world,
yeah,
always invest in real estate. It will never fail you. If you find it at the right moment in the market, it will never fail you. You have tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's the investment. Don't
yeah,
gamble in the stock market. Don't get into crypto crap unless you really know what you're doing, because it has become a game of chance at this point.
yes.
Invest in real estate at the right moment in the market. But you have 10, 15, or $20,000, a Rolex watch in good condition, in stainless steel, especially if it is coming with all the parts that belongs to it, full set, or at least box and papers, at least with papers. It's a foolproof investment. You won't lose your shirt on a
Lord,
steel.
what do you think about investing in gold nowadays? Um, Knowing the fact that we have a war right now.
I know nothing about that, and Saad, you can maybe enlighten me. I'm always kind of dumbfounded that we have so many people in the watch community who are also crazy about gold bars. Can you help me with this one?
I think gold is a very, very safe thing to have, especially when if there is a war going on. What happens is it is internationally recognized currency all over the world. It is recognized. So even if something happens to these watches, gold will never collapse. Even if there is a slight uncertainty in a metal prices, in metal prices, gold will always have some kind of back, with it. Watches, it can go up and down. It is not commodity. It cannot be still considered as an asset. I would still not consider Rolex to be an asset. It is a luxury item, right? It is a temporary asset for now, but
Yeah,
if something happens and if it can be replaced with something else, but gold for I would say hundreds and hundreds of years is still a standard, or I would say standardized currency, which is
yes,
recognized all over the world. So I mean, you will never have huge jumps the way you have with the Rolexes, while making profits, but at least you have a standard stability. You have a much more stability, and this is the rule in business. When you have slow jumps in business, slow profits, slow losses, that is called a very stable and a better business than having huge lows and huge highs. So I personally consider gold. Uh, I mean, if you want to have a better sleep, you should invest in gold. If you want to have fun, if you want to enjoy that money that you have invested, so you can buy a watch, you can wear it, you can, flip it, this and that, right? But with the gold bars, I personally think that it is somewhat better. You can do losses in gold too. I have done that. I used to do a lot of trading in gold personally, and we can have a good discussion on that also. How you can have a, there was a website called kitco.com. It's still there. I used to see that graph day and night, how gold was going up and down. I did losses in that. I earned money in that too. But the thing is, gold um, will remain as a standard forever.
yeah.
But what happens if there comes another brand and suddenly, something happens to watches? What will happen? Like you just said it, that real estate, invest in real estate if you have uh, money in bulk. If you have $10,000, $20,000, you cannot buy real estate. That is 100%
Agree.
understandable, right? So in that amount, you can only have you can invest on watches, but you can also invest in gold too.
Yes, I mean, as part of a large portfolio, again, I can,
The
yeah,
way
I can
prices
see,
of
I can see
yeah
it being part of a larger portfolio because again, it's a safe haven as most people said. But yeah, I have to say one. I'll say two things. One, if another brand comes, right? Another
yeah
brand came actually because now Patek and Audemars Piguet and even Vacheron Constantin sports watches have become incredibly popular and even started gaining, in the case of Patek and Audemars for sure, mainstream recognition. And that did not hurt Rolex. In fact, it brought Rolex up along with that trend, right? Because people are as crazy as ever about wristwatches and about steel sports watches, especially in unique dial colors. Um, and one can even say that the introduction of the Apple Watch and the way people started getting used to wearing watches on their wrists again may
yeah
have may have helped wristwatches to come back in fashion. It's kind of like Starbucks, right? Starbucks didn't actually, unlike many other conglomerates, Starbucks didn't destroy the industry that it interrupted. It actually built it from the ground up and pulled everyone else up with it because now there are waves and waves of hipster coffee shops in every single major city in the US, and coffee is now the second most traded commodity after oil globally. So another brand comes, Rolex is well established enough that even if they are no longer number one, they are pulled up by the same trend as
But
everyone
again,
else.
I
Because
am not comparing a
one second,
brand.
I'm not
Sorry.
divining anything. I'm just working with facts that we have seen
Yeah.
unfold in the last 2 decades. Same thing in
Yeah.
2008. Yes, people keep saying that a bigger crisis is coming. Maybe it won't be the Great Repression, but a new Great Depression. Fine. But what will survive that anyways? It's like
Yeah.
saying, what would happen if there's a global nuclear war? Well, we
Yeah.
will die and the cockroaches will survive, sure enough. But we are not talking about a market that will come completely crashing down, but something like 2008, when the real estate market burst, stock market crashed, and Rolex wasn't halved in value. Honestly, if you are in a situation where you would have to sell all your watches in the next time you lose your job, don't buy so many watches. You can hold on to a Rolex long term. You're not gonna lose money. If there's a nuclear war or if there's a new Great Depression, you will lose your house anyways. So what are you going to worry about? Like, some stupid watch? Of course not.
Yeah, but exactly, 100%. The thing is, Lord, gold is a raw material. I would say it is a raw material. Rolex is a finished product, right? Raw material will always be much superior than a finished product.
That's
With the
true.
raw material, you can do anything you want. You can make jewelry out of it. You can sell it as raw material. So I personally, and with gold, you can sell it in seconds. Rolex will take time. No matter what you think about Rolex, it takes a little bit time to sell your watch. Gold will sell in seconds.
Right.
Rolex may give you a lot of profit. Uh, Gold may not give you so much profit, but at least I would say um, it is somewhat better investment than a watch, in
I
my
think
view.
Saint Peter says something really nice and meaningful here, that we can look in both ways in addition to what you just said, Saad. I
Yeah,
love gold, bought a bar in 2017 and I've made a bit of money on it, but I wish I bought a Rolex instead, since I could have worn the watch and it would have increased more than the gold. Forget about the part that it could have increased more than the gold, right? Again, we are not diviners. We don't know the trends in the market. We don't know if they will gain and how much they will gain. But you have something that is investment grade. You might lose a little bit. You might make a lot of money if you end up selling it on an upward trajectory. But at
yeah,
the end of the day, you buy something that holds its value and that you actually like, that you will actually wear and make a part of your life, and at least have the peace of mind that you won't lose money on it. What other investment gives you that sort of pleasure? And yes, if you sell that watch, the first time you feel a financial crisis coming, or the minute that you start feeling financially insecure, if you're in that position, of course you will lose money. When you sell a watch like this, you can't. Like, you have to prepare that watch for the sale, get it serviced, right? Make sure that you have all the documents and all the boxes and everything that goes with it. Take the most beautiful pictures and put it up for sale at the highest ceiling, and then sit back and wait. If you feel rushed and you want to sell a watch, you won't make a lot of money on it, and possibly you will lose money. It won't sell like raw material, as Saad is saying. Of course, it won't sell like gold. So if you want that sort of peace of mind, something that you can store away and hold in a safe, that's great, but you can't wear it on your wrist.
You keep your $5,000.
And especially on the Chrono 24, we think that our watches have become so expensive. Every day we become so happy. But when we are going to sell that same watch that we have, you are not going to get that money.
Of course not. Of course not. And even Chrono 24 is smart enough that there's now a function where you can do your watch collection on Chrono 24.
Yeah.
So basically, when it gives you the value of your collection, and when it decides on the going rate for each watch, it basically takes the minimum and maximum and gives you a value right in between. So
Yeah.
it gives you an average sense, a median, so to speak, to
By the way,
decide
Lord,
the value of your watch. So it's not yes, of course, don't think that your watch will sell at the highest price that it's listed at Chrono 24. But when you put up your watch for sale, you would
yeah,
be stupid to put it up for the minimum amount of money you can get it, because then you will have a bunch of people lowballing you and trying
yeah,
to chip away at that price. Sell your watch when you are financially secure. Sit back with the best presentation and take your time. Just as you should be patient when you're buying a watch, you should be just as patient when you're selling a watch. Decide on how you want your collection to proceed in the next few years. Present your watch in the best way possible. List it at the highest price, even the price of a delusional fantasist, and sit back and see if it sells.
Use your circular logic.
Exactly.
look, Big Meech, Lord is making a very important point here. You need to have a holding power at all times, either buying a watch, selling a watch.
And in other contexts as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
You need
Lord,
to
Lord,
yes.
tell us this. How, you know, the best way to buy a watch is to look at it physically. How can one determine the condition of a watch by looking at photographs? I mean, especially the stretch on bracelet.
You see, the thing is, um, when you have time and the luxury, of course you can, when you're looking at listings online on eBay, Chrono 24, other websites, uh, they might not have beautiful macro shots, right? And a lot of times when you see just 2-3 pictures of the watch that seem to be very randomly and arbitrarily taken and put together in a hasty way, if you're not making a purchase at that minute, you have the luxury of this to say, like, oh, to hell with it, I will just look at the next listing. But sometimes people just don't know any better. So when you actually, if you have the time, if you are actually patient, if you're necessarily taking years to acquire a certain watch, you see a watch that, even in those blurry pictures, looks fine to you,
Yeah.
right? Write a nice little email to the person, who listed it. Usually it's the private sellers who have this hasty and very amateurish listings, and ask exactly what you want. Can you give me a close-up of the dial? Can you give me macro shots of both sets of lugs? Can you hold the watch? You can send them a picture of one of the watches you own
Yeah.
that have a decent enough bracelet. You can hold the watch like that, snap a picture like that, and say, can you send me a picture of the watch like this, when you're holding it with the bracelet, I want to see something, right? You have to be patient in terms of the big picture, but you also have to be patient and very forgiving when it comes to certain listings. It's the model you want. You have a certain sense that the watch may be in good condition and it's in your price range. Take your time. Send an email, ask for better pictures. If it says box and papers, and box and papers are nowhere to be seen in the listing, ask for pictures of those. Ask for pictures of everything in a set, and hell, ask for a video. Say, please, could you take a video of the watch on your wrist while it's actually working? Could you take a video, 15-second video of the watch when you pull out the crown and wind? Could I see how the quick set for the date works? Do you know how to work it? Oh, you don't. Let me tell you. So you have to be patient, even with the seller. But yes, of course, given the chance, I would rather see things in person. I would rather examine them in hand. So a lot of times I focus on local listings and local dealers. But if you are patient, if you're communicative, if you don't mind writing to people and maybe even calling them and talking to them on the phone, the world is your oyster.
Can I ask another tough question from you?
Of course.
Yeah, first we will M has purchased from David SW in person, and I agree with him because I know about David SW. Even when he was regular on Rolex forums, when I was regular on that forum as well in the early 2000s, and I never cared about the prices that he used to quote, but he always used to have mint condition pieces. So I agree with him. Actually, he had really good stuff with, and he still has really good stuff. And Archie DP says that Archie says Chrono 24 prices are 25%
10
inflated.
to
10 to
15%.
15%, more than that, much more than that. Some of those prices, actually there is no price control on Chrono 24. Whatever price you have mentioned there, I have seen days just for $100,000 with plate dials there.
Yeah, of course.
And
There are no checks except for the larger checks of the market, and the listing prices don't have to reflect that, right? The guy can list something for 25K and then work out a deal behind the scenes for 12K. You wouldn't know, and that listing disappears, and you might have the impression that something sold for 20K.
no,
But
it's destroying the market, Lord. This is destroying, the watch market. This kind of practice.
so, guys, I'm about to wrap up here. I think Tim has about started his stream, so I'm going to direct people there. Thank you all for participating in the chat. Thank you, Joe, and thank you, Saad, especially for joining me on the panel for this great conversation. I hope we can continue. If you want to support me in any way and encourage me to create more original and new content, please feel free to send me a PayPal on Lord Hellespont the fifth at gmail.com, Lord Hellespont V at gmail.com, or Cash App me at LHVVV. In either case, I'm trying to work my way to monetization. So if you like and subscribe and tell all your friends, I would be more than grateful. If you have any suggestions for future topics, and if you want me to advise you on an upcoming purchase, or if you want me to talk about the history and heritage of a certain brand or focus on particular models, send me an email at the same address. If you want me to review your collection, again, until the end of March, that's absolutely free. Just send me pictures and videos and tell me what time would be good for you, and I will set up something where we could talk together and have a nice extended conversation about your watches and your lifestyle. Guys, don't forget to upvote on your way out. Love you all. I will see you on Tim Wright's stream. Take care.
Thank you so much, Lord. Thank you, Big Meech. Take care.
Thank you, everyone in the chat. Bye.